Is that on? Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I quickly remind members of my register of interest as a farmer? Today, the NFUS have gathered hundreds of farmers from across Scotland outside of Parliament. Thousands more will be watching from all of our constituencies across Scotland. Whether it's due to Labour's cruel family farm tax, the lost or stolen Bew Review money, or the lack of commitment from this SNP government over multi-annual funding, farmers are worried about the future. They're worried about their own future, they're worried about their children's future, and they're worried about their businesses. All eyes are on Scotland for the budget. So what reassurances will the First Minister give today to all those farmers standing outside?
First Minister.
I don't think Mr Eagle helps the farming industry by...
The First Minister.
I don't think Mr Eagle helps the farming industry by using language like lost or stolen money. What language is that for a Member of Parliament to use? I've given a cast-iron commitment that the £46 million will be put into the rural affairs budget of the Scottish Government so that farmers can appreciate that investment. That is a commitment from me, and Mr Eagle should take it seriously. As for the inheritance tax changes, I am deeply troubled by what is happening as a result of these changes. I represent a large rural constituency with many involved in farming. The inheritance tax changes will be catastrophic for the sustainability of family farming. So the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs have both written to the United Kingdom Government to point out some of the issues which I think the UK Government has skated past in their rush to put this particular provision in place that will be deeply damaging to the farming industry. And for Mr Eagle to put any point to me about multi-annual funding when the Conservative Government failed to deliver multi-annual year funding and inflicted the shambles of Brexit on the farming industry in Scotland is an absolute joke.
To ask the Scottish Government when the remaining £46 million of deferred funding from the agricultural budget will be returned.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The 2024-25 budget returns £15 million in capital to provide important support to our rural communities, and the Deputy First Minister has committed to the returning of the remaining £46 million in full in future years. Now, the remaining ring-fenced funds will be returned in full at the right time for specific measures that will help to reform the transformation of Scotland's farming and food production industry. It doesn't impact on the existing commitments or schemes, and the appropriate profile for returning the remaining £46 million of ring-fence funding will be considered as part of future budget process.
Douglas Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. At some time gives no comfort to all our farmers. At the NFUS conference, the First Minister couldn't say when the £46 million would be returned to the agriculture budget. Since then, the Scottish Government has had an extra £295 million in Barnett consequentials from Westminster. So can the Minister tell us how much of this extra money will be going to repay the £46 million taken from our farmers?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, clear and honest, it never ceases to amaze me that the Tory party can come here and make comments about the £293 million, which is actually almost a couple of £100 million less than what there should have been for NFU, for National Health Service consequentials. £230 million of that money will go to the NHS in order to counter the cuts that we've already faced.
Members, let the Minister respond, please.
The phrase ring-fence money, that money has already been allocated, or will be allocated in the future. £15 million has been returned to the budget. The other £46 million will be coming in future budgets once the Scottish Government can work out its priorities after the savage cuts that have been made by the UK Tory Government.
Supplementary, Audrey Nicholl.
Does the Minister agree that capital investment is absolutely vital if we are to transform how we support farming and food production in Scotland, so that we help farmers and crofters invest in improved slurry storage and to take action to tackle climate-related issues like water scarcity and flooding? And how does the failure of the Westminster Tory Government to provide any additional capital for Scotland in the budget affect our plans to become a global leader in sustainable and regenerative agriculture?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The UK Government failed to provide any additional capital funding for Scotland or our rural communities. Indeed, our capital budget is to be expected to fall by nearly 9% in real terms, a cumulative loss of over £1.3 billion to 27-28. Now, in contrast, the EU CAP provided a multi-annual programme budget over a 7-year period with flexibility to use capital or resource spend. The UK Government offers only yearly allocations that fail to provide adequate EU replacement funding or commitment on future spend on agricultural support, which requires long-term certainty. We need the clarity and the certainty from the UK Government about future rural funding after 25 right now, because right now we've got no idea whether it will be Tories or Labour. None of them are committing to supporting rural Scotland.
Supplementary, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Minister will be well aware how appalled those in the farming industry will be at the fact that he is unable to say when the money will be returned to the budget. Is, though, the Minister aware of any other budget being raided in this way within the Government's budget?
Minister.
I think Liam MacArthur is absolutely well aware that every budget has been under pressure because of the savage cuts that have come from the UK Government, and every Cabinet Secretary right across the Government are all trying to find ways to pull their horns in to make sure that we can deliver a balanced budget, as has been done every year since the SNP took government, balancing their budget every single year, so everybody's budget is under strain.
Last week in the Chamber, John Swinney, following a question from me, said that the 33 million from the BU funding that he deferred when he was Finance Secretary would be returned to the agricultural rural budget. He didn't give a timescale. He said in future years. Now, we know what Shona Robeson, the Finance Secretary, said on Thursday with regards to the financial black hole and the pressures facing Scotland in terms of taxation, so cutting spending or increasing taxation. What do you have a timeline that 33 million will be returned by?
I don't have that definitive timeline yet, but I will, of course, be continuing discussions with the Deputy First Minister as to when that would be returned to the portfolio. But I think I just want to be absolutely clear as well that that money is ring-fenced. It has to come back to the portfolio. It can't be spent in other areas. So it will be returned to the portfolio, but it's the details on the timeline that are still to be determined.
Just for clarity, because I don't know where this money goes. Has it been allocated to something else but needs to be found again? I don't suppose you'd know the answer, but it looks to me as though if it's sitting somewhere, it can just come back. But has it been used and it needs to be found and returned?
Yeah, I'll hand over to George who can explain more of the detail in relation to that.
The removal of that money from the Rye portfolio allowed the Scottish Government overall to reduce its spending and achieve a balanced budget. So it's not like the money is sort of sitting in a bank account somewhere, but we have the commitment already expressed by the previous Deputy First Minister and again by the current Deputy First Minister that ring-fence money will return to the portfolio in a future year. Now, our Central Finance colleagues will have the difficult job to find that within the overall Scottish Government budget to make sure that it comes into the portfolio. Of course, as we've already said, we have no certainty over the funding from the UK beyond 2 years out. So we might come to a point not very far down the line where we really, really need that money to come back in to plug a much larger hole.
Okay. That was in a previous financial year, though, so that can't be related.
When is ring-fenced not ring-fenced? Because if you've taken 33 million out of a ring-fenced budget, surely it's not ring-fenced.
It helps us, again, as George outlined, I mean, it helps, it's almost like a loan going back to the centre. I don't know, if that's the most adequate way to describe it, which must be returned in future years.
So it's not really ring-fenced?
It is ring-fenced.
It's just not in the budget anymore.
It's different from any other Scottish Government funding, which could move from health to education to transport. This money is allocated for agricultural purposes. It can only be spent on agricultural purposes. But it wasn't. It was taken out the agriculture budget and spent on something else. It will come back. Yeah, but it was, wasn't it? The 33 million was taken out of the budget to be spent on something else. It was taken out of the budget. It wasn't spent. As trying to explain earlier, it allowed the overall spending of the Scottish Government to be reduced to hit the limits.
So it was used for something other than the agricultural budget, which would suggest it wasn't ring-fenced.
It was offered as a saving. It wasn't spent in another area. I think that's what George is trying to make clear.
It's not very clear. Can I ask?
I'd be happy to follow up with more information and to detail that if that's helpful. But it wasn't spent in any other areas. It was offered as a saving.
It was just not in the agricultural budget, even though it was ring-fenced.